intro and couldn't make it today.
No. Is there anything that we should know about you?
Yeah, like give us the intro. Like,
sure.
That's relative. A couple questions. So, how do you even stumble into this room? What's going on here?
How did I even step into this role? So I have autism and I suck at executive functioning, but I live in a world that absolutely does not use systems that are designed for change and then expects you to just keep up. So executive functioning is responsible for short-term memory, responsible for keeping track of things, doing things on time, track of time in general, organizing thoughts, putting them in order. But I have to pay bills. And so I built a system for myself that once I used it, I realized, and I looked around and listened to other people, I realized that everybody had the same problem I had and nobody knew it. So I've been working on this thing for 10 to 15 years. I'd say initially, like the first seeds of reflection were at 15 years ago, and I had the thing operating about 10 years ago. This is a system I've created, Mindful Money, that allows me to literally not think, or like today I did my budget for the next week and it took me somewhere like 13 or 17 minutes or something. Right. And that accounts for everything in the household and making sure I have money for it. Nothing ever really takes me by surprise anymore. It allows me to save up for all the things that I want, provided there's money for it. And what's really important that a lot of people don't think can even happen, which I'll talk about in the interview, is that it allows me to have a contingency plan already set in place for what happens if I don't make enough. And as an entrepreneur, that happens all the time. So what do I cut out? What do I scale down? In what order? What's the relationship between everything? How do I not get overwhelmed thinking about all that? And how can anybody else have that system? So what the end result is, you go from overwhelm or confusion or frustration or annoyance or really what it is a lack of self-trust into a fully, like your entire worldview around what money, yourself, your opinions, your perspectives are shifts. And it creates more trust, which I've been able to measure, which again affects your ability to do all this stuff. So it's part mindset, part systems, and there's some tools involved and things like that. What I've also realized is that this is a solution for anybody who has overwhelm with any resource. If we put this in a slightly different context, this is a solution for any situation when you have more desire than you have resource. Mm-hmm. That's it. So I came about it by just needing to get better, not wanting to think about it, failing when I think about it too much, and succeeding and doing that wrong enough times.
Right. So when you talk about process, sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. My background, I'm 20 years, I'm 35 years old, 34 years old, something in there. And I've been working on computers since I was 15, probably even younger. So technology is my background. So I'm a software developer. I'm a systems architect. I build things digitally. And my whole goal in life is to automate anything that I don't want to do. So when I think about things like money, I'm like, there's no reason why people are still thinking about how to pay the bills. We have all the answers. Nobody's teaching
them. Right. Yeah, and this focus on process, I think, it's obviously makes you think of the work Ryan does as well, which is, as a CRM person, like, is all about like, what is a replicable thing we can do over and over again, build it out, and then it just does it, which is magic. But I think the journey I actually am really curious about is how do you get to mapping out and defining that process journey, the flow, because I think so many of us struggle and say like, oh, the thing I do is unique every time. It's a perfect jewel every time, but different. It's, more snowflake-esque. And so, so I could never put that into a CRM or put that into a process that gets replicated over and over again. And so it's that process. When you talk with someone, where do you begin to help start pulling out what's actually the same every time?
Well, abstraction and abstraction theory. And what does that mean? So I look for patterns in the change. And that's when I opened this up, I started talking about the fact that we live in a system. We live in a world that has a system that doesn't account for change, but we're always changing. So how do I do that? I look for similarities in the types of changes that we make. For example, what do you think money is? How would you define money?
Uh, the thing that allows me to buy a coffee in the morning, at a very practical level, that's what money is.
Yep. It's the thing that you use to exchange value, right? So what's value? I can just run through it. So what's value is the thing that you find meaningful, right? I just got a Starbucks coffee on my way here, which probably shouldn't have done. And it was delicious. And it had 4 shots of espresso, and it's 7 p.m. here on the East Coast. And I'm awake, and I realized that I egoically wanted the thing. I didn't actually have any value of the thing. I just wanted to do something with it. I wanted to get myself a treat. I was in a rush. I wanted to have a little treat, you know? So my exchange of value had nothing to do with the coffee and had everything to do with how I feel. And if you look at money, it's never about money. It's about how we feel. We spend in accordance to with how we feel. That's a fact. You talk to any salesperson, they know that. You talk to any, even a hedge fund guy or a market investor knows that, except the difference is it's not about one person's feeling at that point. It's about the feeling of the whole. Because feelings and the feeling of people can influence the performance of a company and that portfolio. So money is never about money. It's always about how we feel. And the problem with the systems that we have is that they make money about responsibility, not about being human. So if money is supposed to be a thing that we can do to get the thing that we value, but instead from the outside in, it's you have to do this, and this with your money. And if you don't, you're a bad boy or bad, or you're a failure, or you should be ashamed of yourself, or you should have fill in the blank, or being told if I tell you what's more important and what's less important. Any of those take away from your value and that which you find valuable. So money isn't money. Money is a way, like people think about money as this thing. And when I ask people what money is, they do what you did. They don't have an answer, but we use it every day. What we really are using every day is our emotional self. We're saying, I value a thing. For me, it was just a little treat. It wasn't even about the coffee. For you, maybe it is the coffee. Maybe it's not. But we live in a universe of symbols. Coffee is not about the coffee. What does it really mean? Is it about having energy? Is it about the treat like it was for me? Is it about something that tastes good? My partner loves Starbucks coffee because she likes the taste. Different reasons. But when people point out money and say, hey, here's this dollar, and you shouldn't have spent all that money on takeout, well, maybe people really enjoy not cooking. So the way that I got here and the way that I've been able to abstract out all the change is by looking at principles like that and applying them and testing them. So that's why it's taken me 10 years. If you look at Ryan, you do CRM stuff. So, in a business, what you would first outline the process that the person would follow manually. There would be some metric for success about that process. There'd be some way to measure its effectiveness. And then you would lather, rinse, and repeat until it's efficient. And then you'd automate it. With me, I started by having a stack of receipts this thick, trying to keep track of all of my what I should have in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and got to that point and had nothing left over and said, well, clearly my planning's working. Let's look at something else. Started to look at my behavior. Started to look at what I was spending money on. Got really frustrated that I was spending money on things I thought were valuable, but my projections of what I should be doing didn't pan out. And that sounds like, I would say, 80% of people. And when you say, what did you spend the money on? They look at you like either I don't know, or I'm too afraid to spend it, which means they spend it impulsively anyway, which I'll get to in a sec, or they do know and they don't feel good about it most of the time. Because what will end up happening with those people that I speak with, and what was happening for me, is I would have something come up, like at that time when I had a stack of receipts, it was repairs on my car. I had a Subaru, oil changes are $80 on a Subaru, in America at least. I had car insurance. My insurance premiums were through the roof. I was a young dude. I had other stuff that would come up that wasn't regular and take me by surprise. That's just a lack of preparation. and take away from the money I thought I had. And it would always feel like an up and down emotional roller coaster. So once I realized that my behavior was a bit to blame, and that I was having this emotional roller coaster, I said to myself, how can I normalize that feeling? How can I have a sense of confidence and trust that these things that take me by surprise no longer will? And ideally, without sacrificing the feeling of this is a treat and I want it and I get to have it. Because what most people do is they'll get paid, they'll realize that they don't have a lot of, especially if you're on salary, you get paid, and then there's this anxiety around, oh, I have to pay this big bill, usually it's rent or something, this month, and I have very little left over, but whatever I have to save because my whole next check won't cover that next bill. And so then I'm going between anxiety and freedom every 2 weeks. So the question is, how can we stop that roller coaster? Because when you're in anxiety, you spend impulsively, and I'm going to get to that mechanic shortly. But when you are in freedom, you also spend impulsively, but that's because you feel good, not because you're trying to feel good about not feeling good. So either way, you're going to spend impulsively. The only way, and that's human, and I'll talk about why and how that happens. But the only way that we can manage, in my opinion, our impulse, besides becoming aware of it, is to reduce the noise, to reduce the change, to reduce the take me by surprise stuff, to reduce everything that I know I have to use resources on to the most consolidated form possible. So that's what I've been able to do. Part of this system is a method that allows you to see just one amount that you have to pay every week. And if you don't have that amount, then there's a contingency plan in place for all these different categories of things. But when you look at it, when you get paid, it's just one box with the amount that you need. That's it, and it takes care of everything. And it's the same amount every time. So when something comes up every 6 months, you have the money for it. Or maybe in the first go, you don't have the money for it, but you have a lot more than you would have had. My mom, she's passed actually 2 years ago, but she was stressing out about getting her vents cleaned in her house. She had to do it every 4 years. It cost her several $100s. And when she realized she had to do it because the vent almost caught on fire one time, she freaked out because she didn't have a lot of money. And she was using this program, and I said, just set aside, several $100s. So $400, let's say, every 4 years. $100 a year. You just do some quick math. $100 a year. Set aside $2 every week. You'll have $400 in 4 years. $2. So $2 times 52, because there's 52 weeks in a year, times 2, $208. So you'll have more than 200.
Oh, you don't even need all that extra money. It's extra money. Throw it away.
Yeah, I said actually $400, so it'd be $4. It's not extra money, throw it away. It's extra money buffer. I forget about it and I have free money when I don't think I need money. So using methods like just a slight shift in perspective and automatic discipline can, and just by way of how I consolidate everything, can make us naturally feel as if we're prepared. $4 a week, I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to say this, but I would bet that even somebody who lives on the street could set aside $4 a week. He gets at least $1 a day most times, right? So, but he also wouldn't have vents to clean. But my point is, it's such a small amount. So I did this system again with myself recently when I just moved, and I was getting stressed out about little things, like I had to go to the store every day for something for the home. So I aggregated all of those, about 50 different things between laundry soap and dish soap and sponges and just household stuff. I just, bills and, the stuff like insurance for the vehicle, things like medications and supplements, all that stuff I put into one of these bundles, and it was $400, $400 a week for 50 things. So imagine seeing 50 bills of however much, and then all at different times, and then simmering it down to just one weekly amount. That's one of the methods that we use. So how did I get there? Well, after I realized that I was overspending on a lot of things, of course, that naturally, stack of receipt time, that naturally brought me back to a place of, oh, maybe I should limit my budget. And then I over limited my budget. And I said, this really sucks because what am I doing? Why do I even work? Like, what is this freedom I'm seeking that I'm not letting myself have? And then I went in the opposite direction. So there was a lot of swinging for me between I deserve freedom and I need discipline. And it wasn't until I bought that Subaru I was telling you about. And when I bought the car, they said to me, do you want to just have your car payment be taken out when you get paid? So I got paid bi-weekly at the time. I was on salary. And they said, every 2 weeks when you get paid, we'll just have it come right out of your paycheck. We won't even have to think about it. So your car payment will be handled. And I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great. I don't see a downside to this. And of course, they had their, little extra fee or whatever, but for the convenience, I said yes. And I didn't even see how that would apply to the rest of my life and all the stuff I just explained moving forward. But I said yes. And it wasn't until a year after that where I asked myself, hey, what if I did this with everything? And I did. I got that one company to do that with all my bills. And it wasn't until I did that I said, okay, so now all these other random things, if I bucket and I put in if I consolidate and put in these like envelopes, you could think of them like I just explained to you, then what?
The way you're describing it is exactly what my grandmother did. She lived on envelopes like that. Basically, go to the bank, get some cash once a month, and then broke it out by week. Yeah.
Yeah, so then what happens though? If I have all of my worries automated, no matter how much I worry, what do you think would happen?
Through the power of worry, does it automatically solve itself the problems?
Kind of. Yeah. So if I'm so used to being scared and anxious and worried about not having money, and all of a sudden I say to myself, oh, I'm scared and worried and anxious. And then I say to myself, why am I scared and worried and anxious? Oh, because I'm afraid that something might come up and nothing comes up. And then nothing comes up again. And then when something does come up, I realize I've already taken it into account. It's handled and there's money for it. That can only happen for so long before the worry goes. So it sort of automatically clears all the old trauma or money story or energetics around I can't, I'm not good enough, I'm poor, all of the stuff around money that people have, all the beliefs around the rich and how they operate, which is totally false, but it's born from jealousy because there's no financial education for people that don't have a lot of money. And the only financial education that does exist is here's how to do your bills month to month. So here's how to know if you have enough. And here's how to invest, into a 401k. And here's some vehicles that you could use for life insurance. But there's nothing that gives you a practical approach. So I started asking myself, before I go into that, how are we doing? You guys have any questions? You following what I'm saying?
I think so. Yeah. I'm at this point just trying to get a sense to how do we get to this practical place from the idea you've been outlining.
Yeah. So I asked myself why. Why do I feel better? What is it that causes me to not feel good when I'm not automated? And it might seem like a really simple solution, but if it was so simple, then why don't more people know it? Why isn't it used? And why do people still feel bad? And then I lost my job as I'm asking myself all these questions. Then I lost my job and had to figure out how to make my own money. And income was all over the place. So screw that system. That didn't really work. I mean, it did. It allowed me to have all my bills paid, like I showed you that $8 extra. I do that enough times or for a couple of years, one bill is paid completely ahead. So I lost my job and all my bills were paid a month ahead. I didn't even have to worry about it because of this system and how I round and a few of the principles we incorporate. But then I was back to the same place, and I'm like, I thought I just fixed all this. I thought I had this newfound wonderful perspective. Why am I now spending impulsively still? And I just had to do a really deep inquiry into myself and why I'm spending the way I am, and do some research, and then uncovered what people like call. Well, people like it exists, but nobody really talks about it. This idea of cognitive bias, this idea that we have broken thinking machinery in certain conditions that causes us to make bad decisions. And what exacerbates it is too many decisions. So after the practical kind of application, I went into a deep psychological dive and started to get really clear on psychology and how the human mind works. And when I present this idea, I usually do it kind of the other way around. I guess telling my story is a good hook, but I usually just, talk about the value of money, what money is for people. And then I get into, like usually the people I'm speaking with are overwhelmed or they have some kind of stuff around money. So I start to paint those mechanics. And I don't know that I'm the first to discover this, but I think I'm the first to apply it to money, which is the idea that one professor from Princeton and one from Harvard came up with, which is called bandwidth tax. Bandwidth tax is a phenomena that makes us dumber when we have too much to focus on, literally measurably dumber. So if we're dumber because we have too much to focus on, we're not going to make the best decisions. Some people call that overwhelm, but it happens way before you feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're dumber. We don't make the best decisions. We make poor decisions. We feel bad about the poor decisions. Then we try to manage the too much. We get it's just a bad cycle. So the only way, and that's why people spend impulsively, right? Because when you don't feel like you have enough, or when your IQ is reduced and your ability to think rationally is reduced, you're going to be emotional. If you're already an emotional person, you're going to be even more emotional. And all that we seek is relief when we're overwhelmed. So what do? We go buy the video game or the coffee or go out to eat or whatever. And that's fine because that's our body and our mind operating how it should. Like that is actually us operating correctly. Current financial advice says, nope, don't do that. Have some discipline, control yourself, all that toxic stuff. But it's our body doing what it should be doing. When that happens, we're more subject to bias. You say to me, hey, Chris, this is a really good idea. I did it. I was fine. Don't you want to do it? And that sounds more reasonable. And there's all kinds of biases, and I can get into some. But when that happens, we get overwhelmed. When we get overwhelmed, we tend to make the wrong decision. Making the wrong decision. What is a wrong decision? It's one that's not in alignment with what we value. It's one that, going back to what is a dollar, it's one where, if that coffee was $15 and you really wanted that coffee, if you were overwhelmed, all you'd want was the coffee because that'd be the only thing on your mind, possibly, depending on your personality. So that opened up a whole new third dimension, which is some biases, some tendencies, some failures in our thinking machinery only apply to certain people. Some are static and apply to everybody, and others are dynamic and apply to all kinds of different people. But it basically boils down to that seesaw of overwhelm. With that, I've been able to focus everything on consolidation and making decisions easier, and trust that philosophy and those principles and that theory can be depended on. And then through that, I was able to make the system even more efficient in some ways that are incredibly counterintuitive. I'm wondering if at this point, I've done a lot of talking and I kind of just went off on it, and you asked me a simple question, how did I get here? I'm wondering, I feel like we're kind of rolling. I'm wondering, number one, did I answer your question? Or two, where do you want me to go from there?
Yeah. So I think, we got a good sense of the thinking that got you to the idea of this bundling. It almost sounds as how I might think about this. To sort of say this is not 1,000 little things, but rather just so one thing you need to pay attention to. And then from there, you can then sort of debundle it by making it into regular payments or other kinds of structured ways to sort of come at the solving the bundled problem, basically. So, I've only to leave in another 10 minutes. I'm actually going to be starting up an event like this for what's that place called? Orlando, Florida. But from here, I want to get a sense of so where does one start if we want to sort of take this approach and bring it into our own lives?
Sure. So when you say you have to leave in 10 minutes, does that mean we all do, or just you?
No, actually, this can continue a bit longer if the two of you'd like to go on. But yeah, I'll need to head out.
All right. So where does one start? Well, I would want to know what overwhelms you. I would want to know what your personality is. If somebody were to walk in the door and say to me, I want to start on the system. Oh, and by the way, before I get into this, it's not just the bundling. My phrase, my statement of whatever, is that mindful money aligns your spending and your saving with your values and your feelings so that you can get what you want more often and be happier about money. The bundling is just one technique, and it's the most recent one that I've used to explain how this actually works. But how do we know what to bundle? How do we know what order to pay things in? How do we know what to do when there's not enough? That's that whole alignment piece, and that's kind of the secret sauce, I guess. There's a few structures that allow us to manage that, but really it comes down to being completely 100% clear on what you value. And I have a vehicle to do that, an exercise to do that, and then that builds a structure that we use to help prioritize. Because when you want money for something, when you have money and want to know what to do with it, ideally without being impulsive, or if you want something, whether that's something that you didn't anticipate or whatever. So it's kind of all of that. It's the alignment piece. The bundling is a method that we use. The alignment is really the key, because people have to be clear on what they feel and what they value. So to your question, where do people start? Usually I would just start asking them some questions like, what stresses you out? Tell me about what stresses you out. And there's people that are stressed out about, not just about money. And then I'll ask them the same question I asked you. What do you think money is? So we have that conversation about feelings. And then we get into, if they agree that they spend it based on emotion, which people do, you can bank on it. Then we get into, all right, well, let's get clear on your hierarchy of values. And I take them through an exercise that creates an actual hierarchy of values for them based in Maslow's hierarchy that allows them to take all of their desires, wants, feelings, whatever, bills, expenses, things that take you by surprise, things you want to save up for, whatever, and put them in this structure. And this structure, the output of it is, this is more important than this. This is more important than this. This is more important than this. So when you say, I don't know what to do when I don't have enough, or how do I know what I, how do I trust that I'm spending money on something? How do I trust that there's something that isn't more important? That's how you know a structure like that, the value hierarchy. If they still, are on the fence about whether or not they have extra or whether or not they could spend it on things that they want, the first thing I'll do before we even get there is create a budget. I'll just create a budget for them. I'll say, what are your bills? What is the stuff that takes you by surprise? Let's get it all on the table. 9 times out of 10, they have more money available than they thought they would. And that's just because people are impulsive. So people will see, if I did this with you, you would see that every week you should have X. Naturally, that prompts the question, why don't you have X? Why don't you have whatever that is? We get clear on your values, we plug everything you want into your values, and then we map out, I call it your stream of consciousness. We map out all of those things that are most least important in a different structure that we have. And that gives you a way to say, oh, I got paid, where am I putting that money? It gives you a way to begin to bundle things together. It gives you a way to begin to create not only a structure that works for you specifically, but one that also respects your value system. The hierarchy of values is only one way, one structure in which you can put things. But some people, before they even get to wants, know, for instance, that they have a business and 20% needs to come off the top. They might have child support, and that just comes out. I value food over bills, so I'm going to put food as the number one thing. So it doesn't always respect that hierarchy, but it most certainly can. The hierarchy is a method, right? And I work with them in one-on-one sessions or in a group setting to implement that system. I mean, once you have the core concepts, the idea that we are overwhelmed and we don't know it, and there's some telltale signs I can tell when people are overwhelmed, and there's an exercise that I can take people through to prove to them that they get overwhelmed when there's too many options before they even know it. And when that occurs, when that light bulb goes off for them, that shifts their whole paradigm. They then know that they're overwhelmed. They know that happens. They know what bias is. They know that when they look at their 30 bills, they're going to be overwhelmed. And I use overwhelmed really liberally. Have you ever heard of the jam experiment?
No.
So the jam experiment really isn't, well, I'll tell you what it's not. It is not a really bad attempt at music from a 90s hair band. It is an experiment that a marketing company did selling jam in a store, like fruit jam. What they did is they had, I think, 7 different samples. I don't have this in front of me. I could pull it up if you guys really want the numbers, but they had, 7 different samples, I think it was. And when they sampled this jam, more people sampled it. So something like 40% of the people sampled the jam, but only like 3 or 4% purchased. When they reduced it to 2 or 3 options, fewer people sampled, but more people purchased. It was an average of 3 times more purchases overall. So what that translates to is it's easier to choose if we have less options. And so think about how many bills you have. Think about how many things you put money toward. It's probably more than 3. And so the result of that is you're operating automatically from a place of looking at too many details. And I can prove that in 10 minutes or less. That's one of my little things I would take people through to just demonstrate how this phenomenon works that we don't even think about and are really not conscious of. So once you're aware of that, then it's everywhere. It's everywhere from when you sit down to do your budget to, there's a list that I have of 50 different things that I want. How do I manage that list? I just align them with how I feel. That value hierarchy is very useful because it asks us to say, when I receive this thing, how am I going to feel? And if I don't get this thing, how am I going to feel? And it follows Maslow's hierarchy. So it's like a threat of not having food. What does that feel like in your body and your emotional landscape? When you know that you can support yourself and have a roof over your head and have food all the time, no matter what, with no inconvenience, how does that feel? Those are 2 polar opposite emotions with a really high level of intensity. And as we go up Maslow's hierarchy, that intensity gets lighter. There's less weight. There's less stress involved. There's a big difference between not feeling like you don't have food and feeling like you can't call a friend for connection, which is a level. So it doesn't really matter what's at risk. What matters is how we feel. Mm-hmm. And by creating a hierarchy of how we feel and then associating each of those 50 items to each level in that hierarchy, I can then manage 50 items without stress because I'm feeling each item and I'm going one at a time and I'm only looking at one thing at a time. Or in that what I call the decisions on demand exercise, I look at 2 things at a time and that's it. Because we as humans cannot process more than our minds are capable of, but everywhere expects us to.
Great. So I'm going to need to start heading out. But Chris, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. As I say, we will have the recording available to you in the next while. And I'll actually just put that right on this event page that you came in to do the registration and sign in. So it'll live right there. It'll be a YouTube link. So of course you can just take that and go with it. And reach out to me if you need the original files, if you want to cut anything else into any video files or anything like that. If you're more ambitious, let me know, and I'm happy to support you in that as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Did you, I hope you learned something today. I feel like I was a little bit all over the place, but I might just be super caffeinated.
4 shots at 7 p.m. It's ambitious. I think it was helpful for me to just get a sense of just how do you sort of think about what your values are and your priorities are, which I think is an interesting way to think about just the tasks, the things consuming our lives, is to, before you get all wound up in that, say what do I really care about? What's the important parts of that?
There's that, and let me leave you with this because I know you need to head out. It's less about what are the important parts, because that'll evoke a biased answer. That'll evoke an answer that you already have a story prepared for. It's more about, by doing this thing, what am I not doing? By buying this thing, what am I not buying that I might have said just yesterday I wanted to buy? This idea of bias says that things that happen, one of them says that things that happen more recently they feel more important. So that means that if my kid was nagging me for something 2 weeks ago And then now my wife starts nagging me for something yesterday and today. I'm going to forget about the thing the kid was nagging me about. But it still falls.
Right. Cool. Thank you. Ryan, do you want to continue, or shall we wrap it from here?
I think we're all wrapped up here today. Thanks very much for your time, Chris.
No problem. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for this opportunity. I definitely would like that recording, Elijah. I do video stuff, so maybe this could just be a short little intro. I'm not sure, but the more media I have, the better.
Great. Well then, Ryan, if you can just follow up with me with Chris's email through the Slack, and I'll follow up with a direct connection to the link for the video.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Elijah. Take care and good.